My name is Richard James Cook. I'm a game developer and a filmmaker. Let me take you through what it takes to survive in the indie game industry. I've had a very unorthodox career, and how the path has gone and taken me to places that I never expected. Here, I came from a city that had basically no cultural footprint, because growing up, I was all about drawing comics, I was all about playing video games. It was always something I knew I wanted to do, and it was something I knew I couldn't do if I stayed in that city.
I was first invited to Austin whenever a friend of mine, Mike Wilson, he ended up inviting me down here. It's a very spiritual Austin thing, in my opinion, to think that there's creativity like this still alive here. Austin is kind of built on that creativity, and I think it's important that people continue to carry that on in any way they can.
I had always been really fascinated with this idea of marrying technology and art, and it's the reason why I went into computer animation in the first place. One forum I was part of was called Game Artisans, and Game Artisans was a great community forum back in the day that held a lot of competitions, and I created a lot of things over the years for those competitions, and I improved over time, and finally decided that I was gonna start taking this more to the career path. And so it was kind of like that moment when I decided to go indie. So one of my favorite actors, Eddie Murphy, once said, "The advice I would give to someone is to not take anyone's advice." At least for me, when I started the whole indie thing, when I started trying to make my own games, I was realizing very quickly that there was no straight path here. Networking is an interesting thing in this industry, because it's not just walking up to somebody and handing them your business card and saying, "Let's work together." A lot of people think that's what it is, and it's not. For me, figuring out networking was trying to come to this idea that I was figuring out how to be friends with these people more than trying to be acquaintances with these people. That was what led to more opportunities than the other way.
We got one more.
I learned everything I needed to learn just by being hands-on with it. But I still give some credit to schools that teach this stuff, because you learn it in order, and you learn it kind of in the pattern that you should be learning it, instead of this chaotic way that I learned it, where it was just hands-on and many failures, lots of trial and error, and different things that I needed to learn just by being in the situation. For me personally, I'm not a programmer, so I've never really dabbled into it enough to have the aptitude to do it. So I have to approach it from a different perspective. I have to look at it in a different way, and I usually go straight to documenting the idea. I'm thinking about it as a designer. I'm thinking about how this game is going to be fun. What's the fun factor to say? What's the way that you're going to control whatever element that you're putting into this game? You know, how's the person playing it going to feel whenever they play it?
I grew up a console kid, and I just got really used to the idea of using a controller. So even whenever I eventually moved into like PC games and stuff, people hate me for it, but I play first-person shooters with a controller over mouse and keyboard. And to some people that's sacrilege, but like it works for me, and I can play well with a controller. Like I can actually play pretty accurately and stuff like that. It's just, I don't know, it's the upbringing. It's just the upbringing. It was just about how the market was different then versus now. Like right now, I think anybody can have a pretty well-spec'd PC to play games. Like it's really affordable now, you know, compared to back then. So, you know, it's just a different way of the way I was brought up.
A lot of people go into these things not really playtesting so early, and they figure out way down the line, way too late, that their game is not gonna work out, and then you just spend all that time working on it. The next part of this process is bringing in an artist. The idea is to take it from this small portion of what you created, a prototype, to a more fully realized form of what it should be. Do you want to put this out? Do you want to make money from it? Like, there's all kinds of different goals to go after. And I think that's something that you should realize very early on what you're trying to go for.
I mean, we made some small steps. Like, one thing I added, like the flashes and stuff, because we decided like it was looking too cloney, I guess, to Mortal Kombat, and so we wanted to add like kind of the flashy stuff that they had in like Street Fighter and stuff. Like, it's supposed to be a bit of an amalgamation of all those games.
When it comes to the end of the cycle, you start considering things like marketing. You start considering how you're going to distribute the game. These things sometimes require extra help that can help you get the word out about your game. But there's all kinds of different ways it can go, depending on what your goals are, depending on what your skill sets are, and depending on ultimately what you want to get out of the whole process.
I mean, the cool thing about technology is, in general, is just that it's getting cheaper. There's a lot of options out there that are also affordable that allow you to create what you want to create in the way you want to create it, I guess. Everything's being refined constantly with the engines, and new tools are being introduced, and in my opinion, people don't really have an excuse not to be creative with any kind of spec setup now, because there's a lot of different ways you can go about it.
So it is more or less easier than ever to make a game in a way, at least for discovery. Like, there's so many tools out there now that people can, dig into and scratch the surface with. There's tools like Unity.
So yeah, Unity, it's a really flexible engine. A lot of people use it. A lot of people give it a lot of crap too, but that's just kind of like the engine talk in general. Like, Unreal versus Unity, who cares? Create something. Like, it doesn't matter what engine you use, honestly, but we decided to go with Unity because that was the easiest option for us.
So there's a lot of ways people can scratch the surface before they really get into the nitty-gritty of figuring out what the actual hard factors of game development are and how that stuff kind of comes together.
And the really cool thing about, a lot of engines these days is that they're mostly free for personal use. Like, if you sell up to a certain amount of units, you can use it for free and not have to worry about licensing fees or any of this other, fine print type of stuff.
I look back and I see years and years and years of failures, and any semblance of me able to pull this together and get on a path that I wanted to be on. And then the last 5 years, all of a sudden, everything just kind of starts happening. Like, is that the way it was supposed to go? Why didn't I get this job in AAA all these years ago and, continue on a traditional path or anything like that? And then I start to think to myself, what I would tell people is, the path that I walk is not your path. You're not going to walk the same, way that I went. You're not going to meet the same people that I met. You're not going to have the same opportunities that I did. But that's not a bad thing, because you might have better opportunities and you might meet more important people. The idea is that you shouldn't just expect to know what's going to happen next. And I think that serves a lot of people well whenever they pull it back and they realize that there's no right way to do something in this industry. And the idea is to just do. Because in the morning when I wake up, I know I have to create. Like, I will not feel fulfilled if I don't create. And that's my direction in this industry. And that's the direction that I'm going to keep going.